The chair recognizes the member from Milford, Representative Daniels, who moves that the House adjourn from the session of April 10th, 2025. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. The ayes have it and the House is adjourned. The House will attend to a prayer by House Chaplain Reverend Jonathan Hopkins, pastor at Concordia Lutheran Church in Concord. Let's find our seats and give him our attention.
Morning. Let's pray. Dear God, we are reminded that we come here today not alone, but with those that have gone before us and those who come after us. We are reminded today that we come to this place standing on the shoulders of those who have come before us. We stand in the shadow of men and women who heard the call to public service and built up our democracy with passion and integrity. We're reminded today that we come to this place to make laws that will reverberate for years to come. We make laws not just for us, but for our children who come after us. It is because of this that we remember our sacred duty within this chamber to give of our best selves, to give our hearts and minds that will produce just laws, that will honor those who have come before us and help those who come after us. Be with us today, God, as we make decisions, listen to each other, and vote our conscience. Help us to be wise, brave, and compassionate, so that those that come next will look back and be proud of the work we have done here today. Amen.
The chair recognizes the member from Hampstead, Representative Joseph Guffrey, who will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The chair recognizes Ella Burroughs from Hampstead, who will now sing our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Reminder to turn on your voting stations. The House will attend to requests for leaves of absence.
Mr. Speaker, the day, illness, Representatives Fadolfi, Gagne, Herbert, Packard, Prudhomme O'Brien. The day, important business, Representatives Ball, Boschman, Bogart, Bouchard, Bridle, Treresia, Arnold Davis, Dumont, Edwards, England, Foote, Haskins, Janesian, Nab, Kutab, Levesque, Litchfield, Lewis, Mandelbaum, McFarlane, Miller, Alessandra Murray, Mark Pearson, Rombo, Sargent, Seidel, Sellers, Jeffrey Smith, Stringham, Telez, Trottier, Varney, and Vayu.
These leaves of absence shall be granted unless otherwise ordered by the House. The House will attend to the introduction of guests.
Mr. Speaker, please welcome Scott Johnson, guest of Representative Van de Castile, Sean Mei Zhang, guest of Representative Selig, Hunter, Christine, and Bay O'Mara, son-in-law, daughter, and granddaughter of Representative Crawford. They are with us in the gallery today.
Welcome to the New Hampshire House. The House will now attend to the consent calendar.
Mr. Speaker, from the Committee on Children and Family Law, Senate Bill 23, removed by Representatives Tom Mannion, Love, Bernardi, Dry, Diane Kelly, Panic, Sarah, Bean, Drago, and Granger. From the Committee on Housing, Senate Bill 284, removed by Representatives Panic, Turcott, Nelson, Perez, Flanagan, Rice, Coker, Ankerberg, Tensar, and Lily Walsh.
Are there any other bills to be removed from the consent calendar? Representative Ammon moves that the consent calendar with the relevant amendments as printed in the day's House record be adopted. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? And the consent calendar is adopted. Under the rules of the House, from the Committee on Resources, Recreation, and Development, Senate Bill 110FN is referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. The House will now attend to the regular calendar. The Committee on Executive Departments and Administration, in which is referred Senate Bill 74FN, an act relative to real property annual reporting requirements of state departments for permitting programs. Having considered the same, report the same with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Erica Leon for the committee. The questions on the majority committee report of ought to pass. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? And the committee report's adopted. Senate Bill 74 is referred to the Committee on Finance. The majority of the Committee on Judiciary, to which was referred Senate Bill 146FN, an act relative to medical examiners' certificates and medical certification of the death record. Having considered the same, report the same with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Marjorie Smith for the majority of the committee. The minority of the committee, having considered the same and being unable to agree with the majority, report with the following resolution: resolved that it is inexpedient to legislate. Representative Christine Perez for the minority of the committee. Questions on the majority committee report of ought to pass. You ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? No. The ayes have it, and the report is adopted. The Committee on Labor, Industrial, and Rehabilitative Services, to which was referred Senate Bill 67FN, an act relative to workers' compensation and resolution of payment disputes. Having considered the same, report the same with the following resolution: resolved that it is inexpedient to legislate. Representative Samuel Farrington for the committee. For what reason does the member rise?
To make a motion, sir.
State your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to table SB 67.
Representative Creighton moves that Senate Bill 67 be laid on the table. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? The ayes have it, and 67 is laid on the table. The majority of the Committee on Labor, Industrial, and Rehabilitative Services, to which was referred Senate Bill 169, an act requiring employers to provide certain information regarding cost sharing to employees receiving workers' compensation benefits. Having considered the same, report the same with the following resolution: resolved that it is inexpedient to legislate. Representative Lino Avellani for the majority of the committee. The minority of the committee, having considered the same and being unable to agree with the majority, report with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Brian Sullivan for the minority of the committee. For what reason does the member rise?
To make a motion, Mr. Speaker.
State your motion.
I move to table SB 169.
Representative Creighton moves that Senate Bill 169 be laid on the table. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Hold up. You want a division? All right, this will be a division vote. Members, take your seats and turn your voting stations on. The question is whether to lay Senate Bill 169 on the table, and this is a division vote. If you're in favor of tabling, press the green button. Opposed, press the red. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote in this exciting one? The House will attend to the state of the vote. 313 in the affirmative, 19 in the negative. The motion's adopted. The majority of the Committee on Labor, Industrial, and Rehabilitative Services, to which was referred Senate Bill 171, an act relative to required pay for remote work, having considered the same, report the same with the following amendment and the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. With amendment, Representative Brian Labrie for the majority of the committee. The minority of the committee, having considered the same and being unable to agree with the majority, report with the following resolution: resolved that it is inexpedient to legislate. Representative Chris Schultz for the minority of the committee. The question is on the committee report, the committee amendment, which is 1520H, printed on House Record 22 on page 24. For what reason does the member rise?
For a motion, Mr. Speaker,
State your motion.
I want to lay 171, Senate Bill 171 on the table.
Representative Susi moves that Senate Bill 171 be laid on the table. And there's a request for a division vote. This will be a division vote. Members, take your seats. The motion is whether to lay Senate Bill 171 on the table. Representative Susi is recognized for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that the committee amendment would repeal the 2-hour rule, and Mr. Speaker, if I know that the intent of SB 171 was not to do a complete repeal, would I now press the green button to support the table in motion? Thank you.
Representative Labrie is recognized for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that I respect fairness and remote workers, and if I know that this bill hurts remote workers, I then vote no to table this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is whether to lay Senate Bill 171 on the table, and it's a division vote. If you're in favor, press the green button. Opposed, press the red. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? The House will attend to the state of the vote. 170 in the affirmative, 165 in the negative, 171 is laid on the table. The majority of the Committee on Resources, Recreation, and Development, to which was referred Senate Bill 241, F&A, an act relative to construction of a public pier on Hampton Beach and making an appropriation therefore. Having considered the same, report the same with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Nicholas Bridle for the majority of the committee. The minority of the committee, having considered the same and being unable to agree with the majority, report with the following resolution: resolved that it is inexpedient to legislate. Representative Will Darby for the minority of the committee. The bill is on second reading and open to further amendment. Representative Darby offers floor amendment 1814H, which can be found in your seat pockets, and is recognized to speak to his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of amendment. Thank you. I rise today in support of amendment 1814H. To understand this amendment, it's important to contrast the testimony the Resources Committee received during the bill's hearing with the text of the bill sent from the other chamber. Senate Bill 241 establishes a continually appropriated fund for gifts and grants to accrue for the purpose of constructing a pier on New Hampshire's iconic Hampton Beach, with a 10-year expiration, after which unspent funds are distributed to the Division of State Parks. At the hearing, we repeatedly heard the intent of the pier was to improve accessibility to the waterfront for the mobility impaired. Alas, a Hampton Beach pier has previously been considered by the legislature. In one case, it was rejected due to concerns about the costs of maintenance for repairs to damage caused by unrelenting nor'easters. Also, in 2023, another pier proposal was repurposed into the Hampton Beach State Park Accessibility Feasibility Study, which is why I bring forth this amendment today. The accessibility study identified dozens of accessibility recommendations. While it included a pier, most were much less costly. This amendment actually addresses accessibility gaps at the beach, which we heard was the intent of the bill in the first place. By allowing the Parks Division, in consultation with the Governor's Commission on Disability, to use the fund for developing and maintaining all accessibility projects, one of which may be a pier. While the New Hampshire Council of Developmental Disabilities supports the bill, they testified their goal is to improve all manner of accessibility, including recommendations from the accessibility study. Also, notice this bill is not sponsored by anyone in Hampton or even the Seacoast. So what are the problems with a pier? A comprehensive pier development study was completed in 2022. It estimated the planning and construction of a pier to cost from $12 million to over $20 million, and it expected the project to take 10 years to complete. Of course, the contradiction is obvious. It is not possible to raise $20 million, which will take years, and complete a 10-year project before the fund expires in 10 years. The harm is real. Funds that could be used for practical accessibility improvements at Hampton Beach will be tied up in a 10-year boondoggle. Instead, the amendment, which is co-sponsored by a Hampton representative and has bipartisan support from Hampton House members, allows funds to be spent in a timely manner on much more needed accessibility improvements around the beach, such as parking, ramps, and dune crossings. A pier would also impose a heavy ongoing burden to the Parks Division, up to $300,000 annually for repairs and maintenance from the pounding of the North Atlantic. If the intent of SB 241 is to improve accessibility at Hampton Beach, as we heard in committee, an ill-fated fund to build a pier on the ocean will not meet these goals. So please vote yes to support real accessibility to one of our majestic natural treasures, Hampton Beach State Park. And Mr. Speaker, I request a division vote. Thank you.
Representative Harbs recognized to speak against the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill as proposed as a voluntary payment into the fund. Although the amendment proposed by my fellow representative was deemed to be germane, it actually totally changes the focus of the original bill, which was to build a public pier with voluntary funds. The original bill has an offshoot that if they don't have enough money, it would go to handicapped accessibility already on the beach. I don't believe that the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, the Parks Division, needs a separate bill. They already have funds and a budget to help with accessibility. So if you pass this amendment, you're basically defeating the major intent of the bill, which is to create a pier, a public pier for everyone at Hampton Beach. So I'd ask you to vote against the bill's amendment. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, the question is on the adoption of Amendment 1814H. This will be a division vote. Members, take your seats. Questions on the adoption of Amendment 1814H. Representative Munns is recognized for a parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, if I know that the Hampton Beach Pier proposed in SB 241 has little local support, will create significant parking and traffic issues, have negative environmental impacts, and will do little to improve access for individuals with disabilities to all of Hampton Beach State Park. And if I know that in 2023 the legislature appropriated $150,000 to conduct a feasibility study on improving accessibility for people with disabilities to Hampton Beach State Park, which has identified several improvements that can be implemented in the near term at low to moderate cost. And if I know that we have many more pressing priorities in our state than a pier that will cost between $12 and $20 million to construct and $300,000 per year to maintain. And finally, if I know that I and my colleagues from Hampton support this amendment, would I now press the green button in support of this amendment to replace the language in SB 241 with language that will instead establish a Hampton Beach State Park Accessibility Fund, which will be able to accept appropriations, gifts, grants, and requests from individuals, corporations, foundations, government agencies, and public and private organizations to implement real improvements in accessibility for everyone at Hampton Beach State Park. Thank you.
Representative Harbs recognized for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that this amendment actually changes the focus of the bill, if I know that this amendment would basically kill the creation of a public pier, and if I know that the Parks and Recreation Division already takes care of handicap accessibility, would I press the red button to vote against this amendment? Thank you.
The question is on the adoption of Amendment 1814H. This is a division vote. If you're in favor, press the green button. Opposed, press the red. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Muirhead.
Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? The House will attend to the state of the vote. 159 in the affirmative, 179 in the negative. The amendment fails. Now on to the main motion of ought to pass on Senate Bill 241. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? No. The ayes have it, and the report's adopted. Senate Bill 241 is referred to the Committee on Finance. The majority of the Committee on Science, Technology, and Energy, to which is referred Senate Bill 228FN, an act relative to the limitations on community custom generators. Having considered the same, report the same with the following resolution. Resolved that it is inexpedient to legislate. Representative Michael Vos from the majority of the Committee. The minority of the Committee, having considered the same and being unable to agree with the majority, report with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Thomas Cormen from the minority of the Committee. Representative Cormen is recognized to speak against the committee report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This is a bill about net metering. Please try to stay awake for a few minutes while I talk about this bill. There are four major components to this bill. First, it allows a customer generator, that's a fancy term for someone who net meters, to be a member of a net metering group as long as they're also not a group host. The idea here is if you have solar panels and they produce but not enough for all your home use, you can join a group and get the benefit of someone else's solar panels as well. Second thing is it allows a customer to be an off-taker in more than one net metering group, and the bill contains the provisions to prevent double dipping that could otherwise happen. The more important parts of this bill are the next two. It increases the total amount of energy produced by new community solar projects for low and moderate income residents from 6 megawatts to 18 megawatts per year. So this would help low and moderate income people. And the fourth thing is that it adds to the definition of municipal hosts, nonprofit educational institutions and public housing authorities. And that would allow them to net meter up to 5 megawatts. So, for example, this could lower costs throughout the university system of New Hampshire. This would be really nice at a time that we just recommended to cut their budget by quite a bit. It would be a nice way to help the university system. So the main benefits are helping low and moderate income residents lower their costs and helping educational and public housing lower their costs. Now, there are objections to raising net metering. The objection that we hear is that because it would force the utilities to pay the retail cost of energy, that creates a cost shift from those who net meter to those who don't. But the study commissioned by the Department of Energy a few years ago shows that, first of all, if there's a cost shift, and this is an if, it's at most 1%. So it's the tiniest little cost shift, if there even is one. And there's evidence now that, if anything, the cost shift is going the other way. Customers who are net metering are actually not getting enough value for what they produce. A couple of reasons, and again, I don't want to go too deep, but one is that transmission costs are increasing, and net metering reduces the need for power to go over those big wires that Godzilla likes to take down. The second reason is that the Public Utilities Commission is pushing the utilities to go into the spot markets. And what happens there is there's something called the clearing price that the utilities pay. And net metering, by reducing the load demand, reduces the clearing price. So the little bit of net metering that can happen can actually reduce prices because the clearing price goes down. So one other thing I want to point out about having more net metering, it would mean more solar energy. Now, I would say it's produced in state. It's not. It's produced actually at a fusion reactor 93 million miles away. But the money doesn't go out of state. The money stays in state. So, I ask you to vote against the ITL motion on this bill so that we can lower costs for low and moderate income residents, so that we can help the University System of New Hampshire lower their costs. And to make sure we know who's in favor of this, Mr. Speaker, I request a roll call.
Representative Vos is recognized to speak for the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, fellow colleagues. I need to start this morning by apologizing to you all. There is a factual error in the majority report, and as the author of that report, I need to apologize for that error. This bill does not actually increase the tariff for net metering. Nevertheless, we oppose this bill because it expands net metering. And when you expand net metering, you increase everyone's cost. Where's the evidence for that? Let's look next door to the east, to the state of Maine. A report that was published just last week indicated that Maine's electricity costs have gone up 55% in the last 10 years. That's the third highest rate in the entire United States, behind only California and Massachusetts. And the primary culprit for that increase in electricity costs is 3 years ago, Maine expanded net metering from 1 megawatt to 5 megawatts. The Maine Office of the Public Advocate, the office that is the equivalent of our consumer advocate, has stated that that increase in net metering has imposed $220 million per year of additional costs on Maine ratepayers. We also know that here in New Hampshire, our largest utility, Eversource, has reported $29 million in ratepayer costs for net metering. Now that's an increase of from 2022, when they reported $22 million in net metering costs. So in just 2 years, net metering costs have gone up $7 million. That's $3.5 million per year. This bill makes several small changes to statute that in and of themselves are not big expansions of net metering, but when you take them together, they do expand net metering, which drives up ratepayer costs. Now, my learned colleague from Lebanon points out that net metering helps solar, and that's true, it does. But solar systems already receive a plethora of subsidies, subsidies that include investment tax credits, renewable energy credits, state grants and loans, and homeowner tax credits. At some point, we're going to have to stop subsidizing these technologies and let them compete in the marketplace for ratepayer dollars. For these reasons, I ask you to support the committee report of ITL on Senate Bill 228. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Cormen requests a roll call. Is that sufficiently seconded? It is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. The question is on the Majority Committee report of inexpedient to legislate on Senate Bill 228. Representative Swanson is recognized for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that Granite Staters want to reduce our dependency on imported, climate-changing fossil fuels that currently make up over 40% of electricity delivered in the state, and if I also know that this legislation expands net metering options to more communities, including schools and universities, making small-scale renewable energy deployment more practical for them, and reducing fossil fuel dependency for everyone. And if I further know that any cost savings in the future from not passing this bill would pale in comparison to the price Granite Staters will pay for out-of-state fossil fuel market fluctuations and unreliable supplies, then would I press the red button to defeat this ITL so a better motion can be made? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Doug Thomas is recognized for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that Maine has become the state with the third largest increase in electricity costs over the past 10 years, as was previously mentioned, in addition to California and Massachusetts, and if I also know that the principal cause of this increase was the expansion of net metering, and if I also know that ratepayers in New Hampshire do not need any more excuses or reasons to increase their electricity bill, would I then press the green button to forestall this unbelievable expansion of net metering here in the Granite State? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions on the Majority Committee report of inexpedient to legislate on Senate Bill 228. This is a roll call vote. If you're in favor, press the green button. Opposed, press the red. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? The House will attend to the state of the vote. 190 in the affirmative, 151 in the negative. The committee report's adopted. The Committee on Ways and Means, to which is referred Senate Bill 60 FN, An act relative to advanced deposit account wagering. Having considered the same, report the same with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Mary Murphy for the committee. The bill is on second reading and open to further amendment. Representative Drew offers floor amendment 1815H, which can be found in your seat pockets, and is recognized to speak to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is the established position of this body that the legislature should take full responsibility for establishing vaccine mandates. We voted on it just a few weeks ago. Our colleagues across the wall did not agree. This amendment is a message to them. Shirking our responsibility in this matter is unwise. We have a duty to prevent a Fauci Jr. from ever emerging, from using the bureaucracy to remake the social and legal fabric of our state as he or she sees fit during a crisis. Please urge the Senate to put this responsibility where it belongs, on the legislature, and press the green button for OTP. Thank you.
Representative Weber is recognized to speak against the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill covers those childhood vaccinations that are required for school attendance. The effect of the bill would be not only to remove rulemaking authority for new vaccines from the DHHS commissioner, it will also allow the childhood vaccines, which have been authorized and used for decades, to expire at the end of the current rulemaking period. There are already exceptions in the statute for those who object to vaccination. We are already seeing a resurgence of measles and can expect more resurgences of other diseases going forward as vaccination rates drop. This was a bad bill the first time around. Let's not compound the error. In addition, my colleagues on Ways and Means tell me that the revenue in the underlying bill is very much needed. And the ill-advised addition of this non-germane bill is likely to result in the loss of that revenue. Please vote red, and Mr. Speaker, I request a roll call. I'm sorry, I request a division. My mistake. Division.
Roll call. Well, you're both late because Representative Drew requests a roll call. Is that sufficiently seconded? Oh, yeah, this will be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. Okay, the question is on the adoption of floor amendment 1815H, and this is a roll call vote. If you are in favor, you'll press the green button. Opposed, press the red. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Bergeron. Representative Porcelli. Representative Panic. You don't need to say that, thank you.
Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? The House will attend to the state of the vote. 176 in the affirmative, 165 in the negative. The amendment's adopted. The motion now is ought to pass as amended on Senate Bill 60FN. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? No. The ayes have it, and the motion's adopted. The Committee on Ways and Means, to which is referred Senate Bill 63FN, an act relative to funding for the Division of Travel and Tourism. Having considered the same, report the same with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Brian Cole for the committee. Questions on the report of ought to pass? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? No. The ayes have it. The report's adopted. Senate Bill 63 is referred to the Committee on Finance. The Committee on Ways and Means, to which is referred Senate Bill 73FN, an act relative to the operation of bingo games. Having considered the same, report the same with the following amendment and the recommendation that the bill ought to pass with amendment. Representative Bill Bolton for the committee. The amendment, 1470H, is printed in House Record 22 on page 23. Questions on the adoption of the amendment? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? The ayes have it. The amendment's adopted. Now the main motion of ought to pass as amended. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? The ayes have it, and the report's adopted. The Committee on Ways and Means, to which was referred Senate Bill 107FN, an act enabling the state treasurer to invest certain fish and game funds. Having considered the same, report the same with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Susan Almy for the committee. Questions on the committee report of ought to pass? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? The ayes have it, and the report's adopted. The Committee on Ways and Means, to which was referred Senate Bill 160FN, an act relative to the administration of raffles. Having considered the same, report the same with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Brian Cole for the committee. Questions on the majority committee report of ought to pass? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? The ayes have it, and the report's adopted. For what reason does the member rise?
To make a motion, Mr. Speaker.
State your motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move to take Senate Bill 171 off the table.
Representative Sweeney moves to remove Senate Bill 171 from the table. And who requested the roll call? Representative Potenza requests a roll call. Is that sufficiently seconded? That is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. This bill is from the Committee on Labor, Industrial, and Rehabilitative Services on page 14 of your calendar. The motion is whether to remove Senate Bill 171 from the table, and Representative Sweeney is recognized for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that Senate Bill 171 as amended would be a good bill that this House could pass today, and if I know there are members in the room now that weren't in the room when the vote to table earlier today took place, would I now press the green button to remove the bill for the table so we can debate the merits of the amendment and the bill? Thank you.
Representative McKenzie is recognized for parliamentary inquiry.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker, and thank you. And Senate Bill 171 is presented, if I know that Senate Bill 171 was presented to the Labor Committee for the purpose of determining the conditions under which remote workers work. And Mr. Speaker, if I know that the committee presented an amendment at the late hour following executive session that removed the entire section of the law, and Mr. Speaker, if I know that this never received public comment, and Mr. Speaker, if I know there was no opportunity for people to show up for a law to speak against this position of the majority, for a law that has been in effect over 40 years, and Mr. Speaker, if I know that the law that's currently on the books protects employees, and Mr. Speaker, if I know that we need to take the time to look at remote workers and the nature of that kind of thing in the context of the broader labor laws in the state, then Mr. Speaker, would I vote in opposition to this motion and press the red button? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is whether to remove Senate Bill 171 from the table. It's a roll call vote. If you're in favor, press the green button. Opposed, press the red. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? The House will attend to the state of the vote. 168 in the affirmative, 174 in the negative. The motion fails. The House will be in order. And the House will also attend to bills removed from the consent calendar. The Committee on Children and Family Law, to which was referred Senate Bill 23FN, an act expanding the crime of endangering the welfare of a child. Having considered the same, report the same with the recommendation that the bill ought to pass. Representative Alicia Gregg for the committee. Representative Flanagan is recognized to speak against the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't look at the wording of this bill until today. And I thank goodness the clerk allowed me to speak. Because if this law was in force, my parents would be in jail. When I was 16, they let me race motocross. Do people know what motocross is? Dirt bikes, 16 years old. And this has got nothing to do with motocross. I played football, and I got hurt. By the way, I got hurt racing motocross, 6 broken ribs, broke my foot off my leg. Okay, I did all sorts of things, okay? If you read the wording of this law, the parents that allowed them to get injured or die would be in jail. If you had a swing set and they went too high and they fell off, they could be in jail. Water skiing. Not that I'm a good water skier, but when I was younger, I did water ski. So what's the limit here? Is it up to the police officer when they go to a scene and there's an injury? Or is it an overzealous prosecutor that says, I think this is child abuse because you did X, Y, and Z? I don't want to give them that right to choose if you read the language of this bill. This bill sets up families in the wrong way. It's basically saying, don't have fun because it's not safe. Well, who's deciding that? Again, I encourage you to vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Love's recognized to speak against the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 23 and the Children and Family Law Committee recommendation of OTP. While listening to the testimony to two police officers describing absolute atrocious living conditions that they have found children in, I know my emotions dictated how I voted. After some serious reflection on the content of Senate Bill 23, I realized that this legislation was too broadly written and could make felons out of parents who encourage their children to participate in traditional youth sports or participate in childhood activities. Furthermore, adding this new language to current statute, it has little to do with the atrocity of children found in filth and squalor. Because most traditional kids' sports organizations have parental consent forms which waive liability for serious injury or death, would a parent's signature constitute an admission of guilt? Perhaps I'm sensitive to these consequences because of what happened to a grandfather in my town and a single mom in Manchester. One of my constituents took his grandchildren to the park, a 6-year-old boy and a mildly autistic 8-year-old girl. When his grandson scraped his knees and needed attention, his granddaughter got out of the line of sight and got upset and started crying. Rather than helping the girl find her adult, someone called the police and this grandfather was arrested for child endangerment. He was eventually cleared of the charges. The overzealous prosecutor and police officer like Jack was talking about, but Bob incurred $4,500 in legal fees. The language we're voting on could now mean felony charges, which would make a lot more than $4,500 to fight. Look at the case of Alicia Neely, a single mom from Manchester and a state employee, arrested for child endangerment simply for having a legally owned firearm in her glove box with her child in the car. The charges were eventually dropped, but the damage was done. She lost her job and her good name. Senate Bill 23 would make these miscarriages of justice more likely and not less. This bill criminalizes parenting, undermines parental rights, and erodes constitutional freedoms. Senate Bill 23 doesn't protect children, it prosecutes parents. A Class A felony carries a prison sentence of 7.5 to 15 years with a $4,000 fine, while a felony B carries a 3.5 to 7 year prison sentence. It also forfeits the right to vote and possess firearms. Also, it was brought to my attention how this could be weaponized in a divorce case. We can't be making felons out of parents taking their children skiing, riding a bike, participating in traditional youth sports, or infringing on Second Amendment rights. I ask you to oppose the OTP motion so a more appropriate motion can be made. And, Mr. Speaker, I ask for a roll call vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Gregg is recognized to speak for the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this long overdue update to RSA 639(3), the law that addresses endangering the welfare of a child. This legislation, SB 23, was brought forward at the request of law enforcement. Officers who have seen firsthand what happens when our laws of protecting our most vulnerable, when they fall short of protecting our most vulnerable. And they are telling us clearly we need stronger, clearer, enforceable standards when it comes to child safety. Right now, the statute outlines general responsibilities when it comes to child welfare. But this bill takes it a step further. It draws a clearer line between a mistaken judgment and criminal endangerment, especially when that harm is serious or even fatal. This isn't just about updating legal language. This is about sending a clear message. Any adult who is responsible for a child, whether it's a parent, step-parent, babysitter, teacher, daycare worker, coach, or caseworker, must be held accountable when their reckless actions cause real harm. Too often, these cases fall into legal gray areas where the harm is real, the trauma is lasting, but prosecutors lack a statute with the teeth to hold someone accountable. This bill addresses that gap. It adds language to specifically include actions that put a child in danger of serious injury or result in death and classifies such actions appropriately as felonies. It also acknowledges patterns of abuse or neglect over time so that multiple harmful acts aren't treated like isolated incidents, but seen as part of a bigger and more dangerous picture. Now let me be absolutely clear. This bill does not criminalize reasonable parenting decisions. Taking your child skiing, letting them ride a dirt bike, enrolling them in football, allowing them to ride horses or play contact sports, none of those things qualify as criminal conduct. We are not creating a nanny state. We are not undermining parental judgment. We are targeting reckless, extreme, or deliberately harmful behavior, not the ups and downs of ordinary childhood and parenting. This is a criminal statute, and with that comes the full protection of constitutional due process. The burden of proof lies with the state. Prosecutors must prove every element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. This ensures that while we protect children, we also uphold the rights of the accused and maintain the integrity of our justice system. The law focuses solely on conduct that poses real and substantial danger to children. Mr. Speaker, when someone takes on the responsibility of caring for a child, they take on a sacred duty. And when that duty is broken in a way that leads to suffering or death, our laws need to reflect just how serious that betrayal is. This bill gives law enforcement, prosecutors, and our courts the tools they need to act, and it gives children a stronger layer of protection under the law. I urge my colleagues to stand with law enforcement to protect children and vote yes on this bill.
Does the member yield for a question?
No, thank you.
The member does not yield. The question is on the Majority Committee report about to pass on Senate Bill 23. Representative Love requests a roll call. Is that sufficiently seconded? That's sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. Questions on the Majority Committee report about to pass on Senate Bill 23. Representative DeVito is recognized for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that parenting inherently involves taking reasonable risk, like letting a child ski, play hockey, or even ride a bike, if I know that SB 23 expands the definition of child endangerment so broadly that it could criminalize those very parenting decisions, and if I believe that law-abiding citizens have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms, including for the defense of their families, and finally, Mr. Speaker, if I know that this bill makes felons out of parents who give their kids the kind of childhoods we all enjoyed, would I not vote red on SB 23? Thank you.
Representative Gregg is recognized for a parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know that I stand with law enforcement in their goals to protect children, and if I know that taking your kids skiing or any other recreational activities is not listed as a criminal conduct, and if I further know that children deserve to be protected from criminals, not good parents, would I vote yes on this unanimous committee opinion to pass? Thank you.
Questions on the Majority Committee report of ought to pass and Senate Bill 23. This is a roll call vote. If you're in favor, press the green button. Opposed, press the red. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? The House will attend to the state of the vote. 154 in the affirmative, 188 in the negative. The motion fails. Representative Love moves inexpedient to legislate on Senate Bill 23. Are you ready for the question? A division's been requested, and handily you're still all in your seats. So, for real? Okay, who requested it? Representative Granger requests a roll call, and that's sufficiently seconded. Everybody's in your seats, so we're good. If you are in favor of inexpedient to legislate, press the green button. If you're opposed, press the red. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Prue.
Have all members present had an opportunity again to vote? The House will attend to the state of the vote. 190 in the affirmative, 152 in the negative. The motion's adopted. The Committee on Housing, to which was referred Senate Bill 284, an act relative to the required maximum number of residential parking spaces. Having considered the same, report the same with the following amendment and the recommendation that the bill ought to pass with amendment. Representative Joe Alexander for the committee. The committee amendment is 1556H, printed in House Record 22 on page 26. Questions on the adoption of the amendment? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? No. The ayes have it, and the amendment's adopted. Now the main motion of ought to pass as amended. Representative Rice is recognized to speak against the committee report. Euler.
Representative Rice.
I apologize. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. SB 284 undermines the ability of local communities to make decisions based on their unique needs and infrastructure. By limiting municipalities' authority to set their own parking requirements, the state is imposing a one-size-fits-all mandate that may not reflect local realities, such as geography, population, density, public transit availability, or tourism demands. What works in a compact urban area like Portsmouth may be entirely unworkable in the rural town with limited transportation alternatives. Local officials and planning boards are best positioned to determine what their communities need, not a top-down state regulation. Reducing mandatory on-site parking requirements could lead to unintended consequences, such as increased on-street congestion, safety issues, and challenges for emergency vehicle access. In many parts of New Hampshire, especially those without reliable public transportation, personal vehicles are a necessity, not a luxury. If new developments are permitted to offer insufficient parking, spillover into surrounding neighborhoods will create conflicts among residents, reduce quality of life, and burden already strained municipal services. Moreover, the change may negatively impact workforce housing efforts by creating disincentives for developers to plan responsibly. While the goal of increasing housing stock is important, arbitrarily capping parking requirements could lead to poorly planned developments that don't meet the actual needs of the people who live there. Working families, seniors, and others who rely on their cars could find themselves in housing situations that are inconvenient, frustrating, or even inaccessible. New Hampshire should pursue housing solutions that are thoughtful, flexible, and locally guided, not driven by rigid mandates. For these reasons, I ask you to oppose the OTP motion. Thank you very much.
Representative Panic is recognized to speak against the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My concern about Senate Bill 284 and its limitation of one parking space per residential unit are well-founded, especially when given the realities of car ownership and everyday life. Let's break this down step by step to address my point. Household vehicle numbers. Number one, most households average 2 cars, and that number easily climbs to 3 or 4 when teenagers are part of the equation. A regulation capping parking at 1 space per unit doesn't reflect this reality. Families with multiple drivers, whether it's 2 working adults, teenagers, cars, or a combination, would be left scrambling for additional parking. This mismatch between policy and actual need is a significant flaw in SB 284's design. Visitors parking. Where would the visitors park? The regulation doesn't seem to adequately address this. With only 1 space allocated per unit, there's no built-in capacity for guests. Whether it's friends or visiting for dinner, families staying over, or service workers stopping by, in densely packed residential areas, visitors would end up circling the block or parking far away, creating inconvenience and frustration. Exceptions for workforce housing or multi-family developments might be in a specific cases, but for the average resident, this feels like an oversight. Winter parking bans. We do live in New England. The critical seasonal issue, winter street parking bans for snow removal. In many communities, these bans are non-negotiable to keep roads clear and safe. Often parking spaces are taken up with snow bankings. If residents aren't already limited to 1 parking space per unit and can't rely on street parking during those months, where do the extra cars go? This could turn into a logistical nightmare, especially for households with multiple vehicles. SB 284 seems to ignore how weather-related restrictions amplify the parking crunch. Number 4, builder incentives and practicality. Are builders getting a pass by capping parking at 1 space per unit? SB 284 effectively lets developers maximize the number of units they can squeeze into a lot without requiring them to invest in sufficient parking infrastructure. More units mean more profit, but it leaves residents to deal with the fallout. The number of bedrooms is not considered. 1 parking space for a 1 or 2 bedroom unit can be reasonable, although not always. 1 parking space for a 3 or 4 bedroom unit is entirely impractical. in a short-sighted approach that prioritizes development over livability, and it doesn't seem to account for the realistic parking needs outlined. Number 5, broader implications, and I'll be wrapping it up. There might be an argument that limiting parking spaces encourages people to rely less on cars and more on public transit or other alternatives. That could be an intentional goal here behind 284. But if the infrastructure, like reliable transit options, isn't in place, or if car ownership remains the norm, as it does for most households, this feels more like a wishful thinking than practical solution. The policy seems disconnected from how people actually live. Conclusion, this isn't a well-thought-out parking plan. Limiting residential parking to 1 space per unit ignores the reality of multiple car households, leaves no room for visitors, and falls apart during the winter bans. It also hands builders too much freedom to prioritize profit over residents' needs. SB 284 might have good intentions, but as it stands, it's a policy that doesn't match how people live or the challenges they face. Please press red to defeat ought to pass recommendations on 284, and I ask for a division vote. Thank
Representative Andrus is recognized to speak against the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 1925, the legislator, you'll have to excuse me because I'm trying to read and do this at the same time, passed a zoning act. So for 100 years, we have allowed the community, the municipalities, and the voters of New Hampshire to decide what they wanted and didn't want in their communities. And we allowed it. Now all of a sudden, we're trying to take it away from them. That's my opinion. These spaces for parking lots, one size does not fit all. What may be appropriate in Colebrook may not be appropriate in Portsmouth, or Andover, or Franklin, or Londonderry. Every town is different. And we should not be passing legislation telling the voters, you do not count anymore. And that's what we're doing. In our communities, when something comes up in zoning, we all know the voters go to the polls and they vote on it, or they vote against it. These spaces here should be the same thing. I'm asking you to vote red on OTPA, and then if this parking spaces is so important, then let's put it on the ballot on every municipality in the state of New Hampshire and let them vote on the issue. We should not be taking away their rights. And I would like to request a roll call. Thank you.
Representative Potenza is recognized to speak for the committee report.
Hey, this is the last bill of the day, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to remind everyone, SB 284, as amended, is identical to HB 382, which we already passed on a voice vote earlier this year. So this is an identical bill with the Senate. At the time, I wasn't really paying much attention to this bill until like all of the uptick of the heated housing rhetoric began. At first, I was against this bill, in a sense, kind of selfishly, because I was thinking about when my family rented in Bedford, and we had to pay an additional $100 a month for a second parking space. Even though that was a burden financially, that was our choice to do so, and it was our choice to live there. We knew exactly what we were getting into. Who are we as elected officials to dictate what the free market is allowed to do, all while putting undue burdens which have a direct impact on the end user, which is the tenant? This common sense legislation would set a statewide standard of one parking space per rental unit, overriding stricter local regulations that continue to demand excessive parking, often 2 or more spaces per unit, regardless of context or need. We all know New Hampshire is facing a serious housing shortage, and one of the least talked about barriers to new and affordable rental housing is excessive local parking mandates. Many towns across the state have ordinances that are requiring 2 or more parking spaces for every single rental unit, even for studios and one-bedroom apartments. In many cases, these towns apply suburban standards to projects located near downtowns or bus routes. That may have made sense 50 years ago, but today it's out of touch with how people live and how we must build. These requirements are hurting both property owners and tenants. For property owners, the effect is clear. More parking means less buildable space, higher construction costs, and lower housing yields. It discourages small landlords from adding accessory dwelling units. It kills infill housing. It inflates the cost of developing even modest apartments, costs that get passed directly to the renters. And let's remember, these aren't just theoretical costs. In a state where the median rent has risen more than 30% in the last 5 years, every dollar matters. Excess parking requirements force landlords to build infrastructure that sits half empty, while renters struggle to afford a roof over their heads. As for tenants, especially in those living in near walkable downtowns like Nashua, Manchester, or Dover, or near UNH in Durham, many simply don't need 2 parking spaces. Many don't even own 1 car. Why are they being forced to pay for asphalt they don't use? In fact, excessive parking requirements function as kind of an economic, I think, gatekeeping. They are a hidden way for towns to restrict rental housing, suppress density, and keep certain populations, especially working class renters, out. It's just not bad policy. It's exclusionary policy, and it goes against everything New Hampshire stands for. This bill strikes the right balance. It doesn't ban parking. It doesn't say you can't build more if the market demands it. What it says is towns can't force arbitrary, outdated parking minimums that make housing more expensive and harder to build. We need statewide consistency to meet a statewide crisis. We need to implement laws that reflect how people actually live today, not how they lived in 1965. And we need to give property owners the freedom to build smarter, more affordable homes. 1 unit, 1 space. That's fair. That's reasonable. And that's the kind of change that can help real people in New Hampshire. You all know I care so much about the environment. More unnecessary parking, asphalt, equals less green spaces. Thank you, and I urge OTPA's amendment in favor of SB 284. Thank you.
Representative Andrus has requested a roll call. Is that sufficiently seconded? That is sufficiently seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Members, take your seats. Questions on the Majority Committee report about to pass as amended on Senate Bill 284, and Representative Wheeler is recognized for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I know that just last biennium, the parking space requirement was moved from 2 to 1.5, and if I know that top-down mandates from the state is not how we should deal with the housing crisis, and if I know as a zoning member of my local zoning board that you can put in a warrant article and get this done at a local level and solve whatever you want to get done for your town on the local ballot as opposed to stuffing it down the throat of the state from a statewide mandate, then, Mr. Speaker, would I vote against the committee recommendation of ought to pass as amended and in favor of local control? Thank you.
Representative Coles recognized for parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I know the House already passed HB 382 earlier this year on the consent calendar, a bill relative to parking spaces, and Mr. Speaker, if I know this amendment simply reaffirms the House bipartisan position on this important issue, then would I urge the body to press the green button?
The questions on the Majority Committee report about to pass as amended on Senate Bill 284, and it's a roll call vote. If you're in favor, press the green button. Opposed, press the red. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds.
Representative Jacobs.
Have all members present had an opportunity to vote? The House will attend to the state of the vote. 197 in the affirmative, 144 in the negative. The committee report's adopted. Now, I know what happens because we're about to have the third reading motion. However, I urge members to remain in their seats to get past that to the announcements regarding committee work happening today that may affect your plans for the afternoon. The chair recognizes the member from Auburn, Representative Osborne, for the third reading motion.
Thank you. Resolved that the House now adjourn from the early session, that the business of the late session be in order at the present time, that the reading of bills be by title only and resolutions by caption only, and that all bills ordered to third reading be read a third time by this resolution, and that all titles of bills be the same as adopted and that they be passed at the present time, and when the House adjourns today, it be to meet Thursday, May 8th at 10 a.m.
The questions on the third reading motion. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion is adopted. Representative Alexander is recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Housing Committee is going to meet for a brief executive session to exec our one early bill, SB 173, at 11:40 in our room, LOB 305. Thank you.
Representative Ladd is recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House Education Funding Committee will meet this afternoon at 1 o'clock, and we will be looking at SB 204, SB 295, SB 98, SB 292, and SB 294. Two amendments are in the committee room available for committee members at this time. So once again, we will meet at 1 o'clock, and I suggest that caucuses take place prior to our meeting for executive session at 1. Thank you.
Representative Tom Walsh is recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Transportation Committee will be meeting immediately after session for an executive session on Senate Bills 150, 151, and 266. Thank you.
Representative Potucek is recognized for an announcement.
My fellow representatives of the New Hampshire House,
I am a Vietnam veteran. 50 years ago, April 30th, 1975, marked the end of the Vietnam War. By coincidence, our state archivist, Ashley Miller, recently discovered 7 boxes of artifacts in the archives that were left at the Traveling Vietnam Memorial Wall when it visited New Hampshire in 1990. A sampling of those items is on display in the Hall of Flags, and they will remain there through Memorial Day. Please take an opportunity to visit this moving tribute to those servicemen and women, my brothers and sisters, whose names appear on the wall. Could I have a moment of silence for them, please? Thank you. Thank you.
For what reason does a member rise?
For a motion.
What is your motion?
I'd like the memorial remarks to be placed in the permanent journal.
Without objection. Representative Ammon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick announcement, Emerging Technologies Caucus. We're meeting tomorrow at 10 a.m. by Zoom, and we'll be talking about smart grid technology, AI-governed smart grid technology. We're talking to a European company, so check your email if you're in the caucus. Thank you.
Representatives Moffett and Maggiore are recognized for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We just want to remind everyone about the Legislative Golf Classic.
Yes, representatives, please check your mailboxes for team and sponsor sign-up information. The Classic will be Monday, June 23rd, starting at 8:30 a.m.
It'll be at Loudon Country Club. Again, all proceeds to Liberty House in Manchester, which supports homeless veterans, speaking of veterans. And there'll be a great luncheon and lots of raffle prizes.
And prizes for the top golf teams as well.
Same as last time, special contest, longest drive, nearest the pin, straightest drive, and a new one, best looking golfer.
Wait, what?
Best looking golfer, Representative Susi is the early favorite, but the red team has some good looking golfers that'll be in this new contest as well.
Yes, given the, whoa, wait. I forgot something.
I want to add one other thing. We need everybody to check your mailboxes. The registration forms are there. You can send your registrations and checks to Representative Maggiore.
Yes, given the way the budget is unfolding right now, we thought it would be best to have a Democrat in charge of the money.
Okay, we can hear you. I just want to say that I hope we don't have to brace for a golf tax next time around. So.
We know. We just know that the red team wants to take a mulligan on the interest and dividends tax deal, right?
Okay, a mulligan is a golf term for a do-over, and I think we're fine with the ID tax the way it is right now.
Given that we're all honorable, this should work very nicely that this is an honor system.
And I do have some big news to share. I don't want to keep moving, but quickly, I have some breaking news, huge news, beautiful news.
Oh, please do tell.
We're going to have some big special guests, very big, huge, beautiful special guests.
It kind of sounds like the golfer-in-chief is going to be here.
You mean the golfer-in-chief who lives on Martha's Vineyard?
It makes it sound like you're saying the golfer-in-chief who may live in Mar-a-Lago.
Okay, that's a fair assumption, given that the current president apparently is looking to be back for a 4th New Hampshire primary in 2028. But at this time, I can neither confirm nor deny his participation. What I can confirm is that a special guest will be the Marquis de Lafayette, who will be in town.
For sure?
That is true. And The Marquis de Lafayette will actually be here in this hall on June 22nd of next month. That's the 200th anniversary of him speaking at this very spot in 1825. And we're going to invite him to stick around for the next day for the Legislative Golf Classic.
That is definitely big news, and knowing that you've been around for a while, for quite a while, I have to ask, were you here for that speech? Did you guys serve? I know you served, and thank you for your service. Did you serve together?
In the Revolutionary War?
Good question.
Okay, Representative, I'll just say yes. I knew the Marquis de Lafayette. The Marquis de Lafayette was a friend of mine. And you, sir, know Marquis de Lafayette.
Okay, fair enough. Back to golf. There will be a hole-in-one contest, and there is a very nice payoff if you make the hole-in-one.
Make the shot, and you can win $20,000, with which you can buy a used pickup truck.
Or a used Prius, maybe even a new Prius. But more good news, you can win the hole-in-one prizes at the other three par threes as well.
And quickly, speaking of winning, there will be some great raffle prizes as well, a putting contest, which will be run by a couple of our favorite lobbyists.
And you don't have to be a registered golfer to participate in the putting contest. Just show up with a $5 bill. You may get lucky, like Representative Chambrill did, I think, last time.
The luncheon will start about 1:30 p.m., so folks who don't golf, you're welcome to come. Please come by. It's a chance to mix and mingle with some talented lawmakers, but also some friends and possible campaign contributors. And also, the Marquis de Lafayette.
If you're not an early riser, you can still come to the afternoon social for only $25. And think about buying some raffle tickets. And you can also bring some campaign signs to place around the course. If you don't have any campaign signs, you can recycle any old ones that you may have in storage, maybe like Mitt Romney or Nikki Haley or John McCain.
Okay, the campaign signs were fun. We put ours up last time. Bring your campaign signs, and the ones that the representative just mentioned, bring those if you want, or bring a Hillary Clinton sign, or a John Kerry, or an Al Gore, or, and I know some of you folks on the blue side, Tulsi Gabbard signs can be put up as well.
And knowing that a few of our members have been known to enjoy a libation or two under extreme social pressure, be advised that the beer cart will indeed be on the move throughout the day, with some familiar faces riding shotgun.
Yes, and serving as a roving ranger, Representative Edwards will be back. His job will be to provide security, as he did before, and keep things moving. In the interests of equity and diversity, he will be assisted by a member of the blue team who does not mind his cigar smoke. And also, he'll be selling emergency mulligans, and again, a mulligan is a do-over.
And we know we have some great teams returning, like Representative Gorski's team, the Weapons of Grass Destruction.
So there'll be plenty of time and plenty of room for more, and if you can't make it, please feel free to share your registration sponsor with your form with potential golfers. We don't want to see too many of these forms in the giant mailroom trash bin, so share them, and we're looking forward to seeing you and your friends on the 22nd of June.
So yes, please send the checks and forms to me, Representative Majori. My information is on the form. And again, we're looking forward to coming together in a nonpartisan way to support a fantastic cause, Manchester's Liberty House.
It was fun and it'll be fun. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, we have just a few unanimous consents. Representative Malloy is recognized for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's very brief. The Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire and the Greenland Historical Society are dedicating a historical marker honoring Ona Marie Judge Staines this Saturday in Greenland. In 1796, this courageous young woman fled to freedom from her enslavement by President George Washington and his wife, Martha. She arrived in Portsmouth, where she lived briefly and married Jack Staines, a free black mariner. Pursued for years, she was in danger of capture in 1799 when her husband was at sea, and it's reported that President Washington knew of her flight, first to Philadelphia and eventually to settle in Portsmouth. And when his representatives here in New Hampshire were prepared to capture and send her back to Mount Vernon, President Washington agreed to let her live her life here as she chose, here in New Hampshire, and eventually in Greenland, where she and her infant daughter temporarily took refuge with John and Phyllis Jack, members of Greenland's formerly enslaved community. After her husband's death in 1803, Ona Judge Staines again moved in with the Jack family, and the two families lived out their lives in Greenland. As they aged, Greenland provided them with goods and services, including firewood, medical assistance, and burials. Ona's story inspired the abolitionists T.H. Adams and Benjamin Chase, who interviewed her before she died in 1848. There have been books and plays produced that chronicle Ona's story of escape from slavery and how she was pursued here in New Hampshire, and now she rests in Greenland in a grave that is cared for by a Greenland family. Ona made a living for herself and her family as a seamstress and provided other housekeeping services to local residents. She was a contributing member of Greenland for many years until her death in 1848. Her story is an important reminder of how much we value our freedom in this country and the ability to live without fear and retribution. I also think it's an important message on how the mercy of the nation's first president lived and followed the founding fathers' values of this country, at least in the case of Ona Judge Staines, who was, by the way, a personal slave to both Martha and George Washington. Even though Ona was a runaway slave, the President and Mrs. Washington willingly gave up their pursuit to let Ona live a free life here in New Hampshire. And Saturday, the Greenland Black Heritage Trail and the Greenland Historical Society will honor Ona Marie Judge Staines by unveiling a marker honoring her life. Thank you.
For what reason it's memberized?
To make a motion, Mr. Speaker.
State your motion.
I move that the previous speaker's remarks be placed in the permanent journal.
Without objection. Chair recognizes Representative Cormen for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I live in Lebanon, which is the heart of the Upper Valley. And the Upper Valley is really a bi-state area. We, on the New Hampshire side, have a lot of connections with Vermont. My own doctor is in Vermont. I got a haircut yesterday in Vermont. I'm on the board of a nonprofit in White River Junction. So we have a lot of connections to Vermont and Vermonters. One of the Vermonters whom I know actually knows a lot of people in the Upper Valley. His name is Mohsen Madawi. You might have heard of him. He's been in the news a bit. Mohsen was born and raised in the West Bank. He has lived in the United States for 10 years. He is a green card holder. He wants to become a U.S. citizen. And when he went to his interview in Vermont to become a citizen on April 14th, he was detained. Now, fortunately, Mohsen was released yesterday. A judge ordered him to be released, and he was released. He's now free, but he's not out of the woods. The administration is trying to deport him. But he was fortunate that he was able to stay in Vermont. He didn't have to leave Vermont. He was detained in Vermont. He wasn't sent out of the country like many have been. But we're seeing more and more people being sent out of the country, including citizens. So I have a question. What will it take? What will it take for people to say this is enough? Do you have a line? Is there a line that once it's crossed, you're going to say that's enough? So I'm just asking you to think about at what point will things have gone too far. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Representative Bay for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good morning, honorable representatives. May is designated as the Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month to honor the contributions and culture of Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. The month was chosen for several historical reasons. The first Japanese immigrants arrived in the United States on May 7th, 1843. And the Transcontinental Railroad, which was built with significant contributions from Chinese immigrant laborers, was completed on May 10th, 1869. It is an honor to stand before you today as we celebrate AAPI Heritage Month, a time to reflect on the incredible contributions, resilience, and diversity of the AAPI community. As a proud Filipino American and one of only a handful of AAPI representatives in the New Hampshire State Legislature, I'm deeply aware of the responsibility and privilege of serving as the voice of our community. Today, my fellow AAPI representatives and I would like to take a moment to honor the trailblazers who came before us. Leaders like former Representatives Lathaman Jipudi of Nashua, Ben Ming from Hollis, and Baldwin Domingo from Dover, who served in 1998 for the first time, who is, by the way, a Filipino American, was. Their dedication, courage, and vision have paved the way for AAPI voices to be heard in our state, and their legacy continues to inspire us all. Here in New Hampshire, we are fortunate to witness the impact of the AAPI community every day. From small business owners who fuel our local economy, to educators who inspire our children, and healthcare workers who care for our families, the AAPI community is an integral part of our shared success. But let us also acknowledge the challenges that persist. The rise of anti-Asian hate crimes remind us that the fight for equality and justice is far from over. It is our responsibility as leaders and as neighbors to stand united against discrimination in all its forms. We must amplify AAPI voices, celebrate their achievements, and ensure that their stories are heard, not just this month, but every day. As we look to the future, let us draw inspiration from the values that define the AAPI community: perseverance, innovation, and deep sense of community. These values remind us that strength lies in our diversity, and that together we can build a more inclusive and equitable society. Thank you for being here today, for celebrating with us, and for committing to a brighter future for all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what reason does the member rise?
I move that the speeches of the last two speakers be printed in the permanent journal.
Without objection. Chair recognizes Representative Rockmore for unanimous consent.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I
I rise to note that today marks 573 days in captivity for 5 Americans held in Gaza by Hamas since October 7th, 2023. One of these American hostages, 21-year-old Idan Alexander, was believed to be alive until recently, suffering starvation, dehydration, and suffocation in an underground tunnel. 2 weeks ago, however, his Hamas captors claimed to have lost contact with the terrorists holding him. I ask my colleagues to join me in a communal plea for his safety. The 4 other Americans, Itai Chen, Omer Nutra, and the married couple Gad and Judy Haggai, are all believed to have been murdered on October 7th. For 573 days, their bodies have been held in Gaza, their families unable to bury them with dignity and love. I ask my colleagues to join me in demanding an immediate, unconditional release, not only of these 5 Americans, but of all 59 hostages still held by Hamas. Thank you.
For what reason does the member rise?
Mr. Speaker, I move the remarks from the previous member be placed in the permanent journal.
Without objection. Representative Osborne moves that the House stand in recess for purposes of introduction of bills, vacate motions, enrolled bills amendments, enrolled bill reports, receiving messages, and forming committees of conference. Are you ready for the question? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The House is in recess until Thursday, May 8th, 2025 at 10 a.m.